Hello, guys. Thanks for joining us today again. Today we continue our series of videos talking with experts, with pros, where we try to tell you more about these techs, technologies, not exactly concerned with Java, but somewhere around. Well, these are pros that the Java developer should be able to communicate because on many projects you will do so. And today we have here Rafal, who is a front-end developer, and we will discuss front-end development in general, what the back-end developer should know to be able to communicate well, and what is a full-stack developer, and how to become one, and do you really need it or not. As always, I remind you that you can ask your questions in any chat. We will try to cover them as fast as possible. Yeah, and let's start with the first very simple question. What front-end developer usually does on the project?
Hello, guys. Answering the first question, front end means the front. So, usually it's UI, UX, user interface, user experience of entry point for the user. So, we are developing the structure, the layout. We are presenting to the people. So it's web view, it's mobile view, depending on what we are developing. Yeah, generally speaking, front-end developer uh, creates the view of what people see. And yeah, that would be it, I suppose.
Okay, and yeah, I don't know much about the front-end development, but from what I understand, we can maybe categorize the front in three different categories. It's web UI, mobile, and the desktop. Am I correct?
Yeah, sure, exactly.
So it's all are the responsibilities of the front-end developers.
Depending on the level of the developer, I believe both front end and back end does that. Uh, there is a place where we store the code, GitHub, but we also are managing the pipelines between our code and the real life um, infrastructure, I would say. So as a front end, we also create end-to-end tests in my current projects. So I write the test between how it's looking on the view, but it checks every integration test, every unit test, it gathers everything, and it's end to end because we are seeing as the user is seeing. If anything fails, we don't continue. So yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
so I think here the principles are shared for the front end and the back end.
sure.
Uh, okay, let's go further. What are the most modern trends in the front end development that you can name?
I would say front end starts to be lazy because we are moving everything to the backend. Originally, we stored HTML file in a server and we show up everything. Now, when it starts to grow more and more, we put more JavaScript into the browser to manipulate, to show everything. This stream is also based on JavaScript because we want to be interactive, and this is what JavaScript does for us. And this brings us the drawback of JavaScript because uh, the trend of the trend what was from the past few years was making single page applications, so you're not directing to other URLs, you're staying on the same page, and that things are moving, fetching, etc. And that is the drawback, because initially you need to load everything and the browser interprets that. So it fetches a lot of, like, large bundle. And now the trend is to go back to the originals, to split the code into multiple chunks, I would say. So if you go into one page, you fetch this HTML. If you go to another, you take another. So we are moving back to the uh, to origins, to get everything from the server. And still we can fetch everything what we want, but it's not one huge bundle. And also, from the past 2 years, we went more and more into cloud, to serverless functions. We got uh, advantage of not using server, but running only some pieces of code that we want. And I think that benefits the overall costs of infrastructure that we're running to implement some application.
Okay, just for maybe those who don't know, serverless, it actually means that you don't manage servers. They definitely exist somewhere in the cloud, and you just provide the code that you want to run. So you say like, Amazon, I would like this small function, these 10 lines of code run whenever I request this URL, and it will automatically scale, manage it. And yeah, I think serverless is in trend nowadays in the backend too. But just like with everything for backend, it's not a silver bullet, so don't rely on it too much. It's pretty hard to test, maintain, so sometimes it's better to use good old servers. Okay, what about the CDNs? Do you use it extensively nowadays?
Mm, yes and no. More and more we go into the edge, so closer and closer with the servers to the end user. And CDN is used rather for larger files. I would say if you have multiple images, they need to be fetched faster. So yeah, it's not so like everything on the CDN, but yeah, we use it.
Yeah, maybe I didn't think about it. I should give a brief explanation of CDN. Uh, when you run a website, you can have a server, I don't know, in America, in Europe, and in Asia, and like three locations of servers. And on average, each user will spend somewhere around 100 milliseconds requesting the page from your site, receiving it back. So there is a long round trip of the request. And if you deploy more servers closer to the user, for example, in each big city of Europe, this round trip can be reduced to, I don't know, 10 milliseconds maybe, and just reduce the load time of the page. And actually it can also cache some responses, so the number of requests to your server will go down if you set up everything correctly. It can be very, very useful. Okay, great. And what about technologies that front-end developers usually use?
Every front end, I would say, need to know some kind of markup. So HTML and CSS for the web, and lately using also mobile. We can use one universal. I'm the JavaScript developer, that's why I'm using HTML, CSS, and the JavaScript. Yeah, because Now we can use something like React, which gives us the possibility to run one everything on one place. So share the same code on the web and on a mobile, like native. We can build apps with the same code. Um, so we need to categorize it like HTML is a markup. So we need the content, what we do, and in what structure. Then we need CSS. So this is the way of styling if this grid is full height or half height, half width, or not. So what, how, and the JavaScript, like I said before, it's what to do with that. So either you click and something pops up, or sometimes you go to the store and in the checkout you click, yes, I buy, and then sprinkles go from the top. Something is happening. So JavaScript enables you to do mostly anything. So that's the huge advantage for that. Uh, yeah, built on the front end, built on JavaScript, there are frameworks, there are libraries. So it grew uh, very much because we can do nowadays almost everything, including games, including 3D compositing on the web. So it's like endless possibilities. And speaking with trends, now the new browser API came out that uses GPU also.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, that is huge because we can make more and more stuff with that. And that can be also the drawback because if site is not protected, I saw scripts that mine bitcoins on people's CPU. So yeah, everything can be done there. You can do a lot of bad things too. But that is what developers should also know and do, is to how to protect the site.
Yeah, when you said about like JavaScript can do everything, I recall so that I have seen on a conference talk on how to create a ray tracing engine in a pure JavaScript. And well, I wanted to say that it's not very practical, but you can do it. But now, if you can reach the GPU, it can be
Yeah.
actually a viable option. Yeah, and
Mhm.
just as a backend developer, I studied a bit HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And just for me, JavaScript was fairly easy. So it's for me, it's like Java, but in many different things it differs. But yeah, programming language. Okay, HTML is quite simple. It's like a markup. I cannot create pretty things, but yeah, okay, it works. But the CSS, I don't understand it, how it works, how to center a div. Oh my god.
It's something that it needs to be understood, not remembered, because uh, CSS also is a way of coding. I don't know if that can be a language, but yes, it when we approach that as a it's yeah. When we approach that as a developers, we need to understand how it behaves. So we get code and yeah, how it behaves in JavaScript going synchronously line by line, and style sheet as browser defines how to approach that. You're not telling how, but what. So this is the point when you need to understand the principles of the code, but it doesn't need to be so hard. It can be, but it doesn't need to. It's like few things to remember, and that's it. I think everyone can learn that.
Yeah, okay, maybe I just have to spend a bit more time and I will get it. Okay, and if we talk about three types of technologies like markup, CSS, and the JavaScript, from what I understand, HTML it's like the only markup language here, so it can have maybe some wrappers around it, but it still stays the HTML, CSS, the same thing, and the JavaScript. It can come in many flavors. So, from what I know, there is a React framework, there is Angular, there is a Vue, and maybe there are a lot more of them. I have heard a joke while you have been reading this joke, three new JavaScript frameworks appeared.
Exactly.
Uh, so, what are the most popular frameworks nowadays, and what is the framework of your choice?
The most common, the most known frameworks now is React, Angular, and Vue, like you said.
Okay.
Uh, but it's it's changing, like you said, also because uh, everyone wants to make their own thing, solving their own problems. And for example, new two frameworks came up lately, like within year, like Svelte and Quick, which are blazingly fast, but lack something what other developers need. And this is something, okay, so do you want to switch everything to new framework, or you want to keep with old one but swallow every disadvantage what this framework does? And in fact, React is not a framework, it's the library.
Okay.
uh, and on top of React, there is a framework that is now getting more and more popular. It's Next.js. It can contain backend and frontend in one code base, and that's quite interesting how they approach. They also moved from the like frontend back to backend to have server components. So a lot of stuff.
Okay. Uh, you talked about the server components. Do I understand correctly that we generally have two options: prepare the components on the server or on the client, and there are pros and cons in both approaches, and this framework concentrates on server-side rendering.
In fact, you can choose, and that's the flexibility that they
Okay.
gave. So you can say this component is server component, and this one is client component. So
Oh,
yeah, it that's why it grew so much and so rapidly.
okay, great. And you didn't answer what is the technology of your choice?
So I'm using React.js, and this is not from the beginning, but yeah, it's like quite a long time. React even changed in that time because we had class-based components. Now we also I but React rewrites their way of using components, and they introduced the function component, functional. So yeah, I like React because uh, it's little, but it's library. You can take every book you want and compose huge thing. If you don't need something, you don't use it. But it's the learning curve of the packages you need to add. So yeah, for the starting point, I recommend React. And the like community of React is the largest now. So the most used not framework, is React nowadays. Yes.
Okay. I see several questions in the chat. Everything regarding full stack, I think we will cover a bit later. And the question, does front-end now means React and Angular? Yeah, I think mainly maybe, I don't know, 70% of front-end developers use one of these two uh, libraries, frameworks, however
Mhm.
you call it. And yeah, but there are a lot of other ones too. Yeah, I have also heard about the React Native that is used to create mobile applications. Is there a library like that for the Angular, Vue, or is it just React that you can use to develop for mobile?
Google also create because yeah, Google created language. I cannot, I mean, not language, but yeah, the framework. I cannot remember now. But now the React only gives us such possibility. It uses the same components and the interpreter compiling either to web or to native. So that's really great to have.
Yeah, in the chat we have a suggestion, Flutter.
Yeah, exactly. Flutter. Yeah.
Uh, Thank you. Uh, okay, so let's probably go further and talk about a bit more about Java. It's a channel about Java. Uh, yeah, when do front ends and back end developers usually communicate on the project?
I believe the same as application applies in every point backend and front end meets. So in the phase of creating flow, we have I mean, there is a backend who gives us the endpoint. We need to decide like what format, which fields or respond codes, like how we want to communicate in the sense of application. So how the application understands the code, the information we receive from the backend, and the same what we send to the backend. So we need to know what format we are sending the information. Yeah, uh, mainly that part, but also when there are bugs we didn't catch in the implementation, we need to troubleshoot. So we need to know. At first, I believe we investigate front end what happened because we see something is missing, some error appeared, and then I usually reach to backend because they have logs that front end not usually gathers, and from that we can investigate what happened, how we proceed. So yeah.
Okay, so mainly we communicate when there are new features that require new API from the server, or when we have a bug that spans from the front end to the back end and we have to fix it.
Hmm. Exactly.
Uh, okay, and what should the backend developer know or understand to work with a front end developer efficiently?
For sure, there are ways how we can communicate in the application sense. So uh, either it's like REST API, how the HTTP works, maybe some WebSocket if we are using a website. So the way the way we communicate front end and back end. So it's good to yeah good good to know how we want to send the data or receive, or it's bi-directional.
Yeah, so I think these usual two parts of application, they are very isolated from each other. So there is mm, there are rarely shared technologies, and all you have is like a network communication, and you should understand the protocol that is used. So, well, maybe not a protocol. Usually it's REST. That is not actually a protocol, and you definitely should understand it, because like RESTful endpoints for the server is a very common question on the interview. And also there are alternatives to the REST. For example, GraphQL. It has its pros and cons, but on some projects it's like a great choice. So yeah, whatever your project uses, I think you should really understand it. Okay. And yeah, maybe if you have a high load application, you should understand the underlying of the network. Maybe it's not a work of the developer. I'm not sure here. So I think if you understand how the TCP, HTTP work, it's good, but maybe it's not required for all backend developers. Okay, we have a few more questions. What instruments do you use to communicate? Swagger, Postman, etc. Great question.
Mm, I usually get the local environment, and if I'm starting my part when the backend gets the endpoint. So uh, uh, I haven't used in a project the Swagger, but on like other not project activities, I used Swagger. I like this way because I see everything there. What method I should use, what
Yeah.
fields are there. So it's easy, but the same I can communicate with backend developer, and yeah, I usually try to call the endpoint in the application I'm creating. So generally speaking, the backend part is done, and then I start my job, because if I have
Okay.
nothing, I cannot do much.
Yeah, I would just make a note. It's probably not Swagger, but the Open API schema that Swagger uses to generate the UI. But if you have like a common schema that is used for the backend and the front end, you can use libraries that generate, for example, classes for you. Uh, so you generate the class for the Java on the backend, and it will be used as a return type from your controller. And actually, it can generate the controllers too, and you have to override just a few things. And it can generate your maybe even clients on the JavaScript side. So it really reduces the amount of work that you have to do. So yeah, we use it. We use it extensively, and even if you have not a front end and back end, but two different servers, both of them are back end. Swagger is a great tool too. Postman, I think it can be used too. For example, if we share the Postman collection of requests, so backend developers prepare them, and the front-end developers can copy parts of it. I think it can work, but it's not maintainable. If I change something, my front-end friends have to do it by hand. They cannot just press one button and do it automatically. And we have another question. How often do you find that your front end isn't supported by the backend? And would you rather work with a solution architect, a product manager, or both? I don't quite get the question. Could you please elaborate on it a bit? Uh, yeah, I think the project needs both the solution architect and the project manager, because they are responsible for the different sides of creating a project. So yeah, I would prefer both of them. But the first question, please clarify it. I'm sorry, I don't understand it. Okay, and I think we have reached the point where we talk about the full stack. So in a few words, full stack developer is someone who knows the backend, the front end, and can work on the both fields. Yeah, how do you think, what are the pros and cons of becoming a full stack developer, and would you like to become one day?
I believe there are cases where full stack developers are beneficial. For example, in smaller applications where people need to do more stuff because there are no backend, front end. One person needs to do both, or the teams where just the workload is unknown and you need to do front end and back end. But this is the valuable team member to have because if something wrong is happening, uh, he can jump right to the code and fix, not, hey, alert, alert, something is happening. This is really, really helpful, but in the same way, it's two times you need two times more things you need to learn, watch out for. So it's also disadvantage because that person won't go deep into the knowledge. He won't be so efficient as a strict front end or back end developer. So I would say I wouldn't like to be a production full stack, but I would like to be on pet projects or someone needs help on the backend side. I can jump and do something or at least watch out for something, but I wouldn't like to work as a full stack. It's too much things to do, to watch out and learn constantly because the coding still has their trends and new versions came up and you need to track those. So I wouldn't like to be production full stack.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also have some pet projects where, well, which are just JavaScript and they don't even have Java. But yeah. Okay, so I probably can't name any more pros and cons. Yeah, you have to study more, you have to learn more. Maybe not twice as much, especially if you choose JavaScript as
Yeah.
your backend language.
I used backend like I said before. There is Next.js, and I was learning backend how to consume and put into the database, but that wouldn't be an real life backend engineer. But yeah, I tried. I quite like it, but if I see if I see how to work on the front end and how to think as a backend developer, it's I suppose quite different things. So to switch, in my opinion, to switch from one to another like instantly, it takes some time too. So maybe not twice as much to learn, but twice as much
To
technologies that
maintain
yeah.
the knowledge, the level of knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We have a suggestion that pros is that you can create your own website by yourself, but
Mhm.
yeah, I think you don't have to understand very deeply. Well, for me, the front end side to develop a website. Uh, if I develop a website, it looks ugly. It works with a very poor performance, but just for me, for my own usage, it's okay. And Yeah, I think the same thing goes to the backend. You can write on the Node.js, copy paste from the Stack Overflow, like I don't know, connection to the MongoDB database, and do all the logic on the front end. It may be not so that secure, but if you don't deploy it anywhere and just use it locally, it's good. Okay, and the next question is how to become a full stack developer.
Like you said before, we can choose different languages. I mean, from the front end, generally web, it's no go to other way than HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So becoming front end can rely mostly on HTML and CSS and like scratching the surface of JavaScript only to connect to the backend. It can be enough because you need to only call the endpoint and that would be it. If you don't want to do funky stuff on the front end, it's enough. So in current project, I had the opportunity to work with Java, but I didn't do much, just scratching the surface. But yeah, I saw similarities. So Java adding script, yeah. But yeah, these syntaxes and the way of writing uh, can be quite similar. So I would say to go HTML, CSS to bring stuff, and then scratching the surface of JavaScript to be able to communicate with the things you're creating on a backend. Uh, that would be the quickest, but full stack can be also approached from the different level. Uh, as you as a backend know that backend can be like not only Java, it can be JavaScript. If you're learning JavaScript, you can copy paste that to the backend part with additional libraries, packages to create that. It can be Python. Python gives also more flexibility to be larger and quicker than JavaScript. But yeah, depending on how you approach being full stack, me for the front end developer, it's the quickest to use JavaScript on the backend, so it's Node.js. Um, yeah, if you are talking about backend moving to not moving, but merging both worlds to
Expanding.
be yeah expanding, right? Yeah, I also would recommend the React because you don't need to learn a lot. It's just the starting. That's why it's library. You can build on top of that. I'm still learning new things in React, so it can be real deep. And you can start learning, knowing JavaScript, moving to React shouldn't be hassle. Uh, so yeah, for the framework, I would use React.
Yeah. If you choose technologies and you would like to become a full stack developer, in my opinion, it really depends on where you are now. So if you know Java or Python or C Sharp or whatever, not JavaScript, you definitely, yeah, for the backend, you definitely should study HTML, CSS, JavaScript, for example, with React. But if you're learning from zero, maybe I would choose React as the only language that I learn. So to cover both, to spend less time on it. Mm, but maybe it will limit a bit the number of projects that you can join as a full stack developer. So yeah, there is uh, a lot of things to choose from for the backend, and I think much less things to choose from for the front end. Uh,
We have frameworks to choose. You can choose plenty of them.
or you can, well, sit without the frameworks and just code in old plain JavaScript and
Yeah.
build the sites as they were 20 years ago.
Yeah, last time I helped my friend to code one thing. He went into interview and he failed to write everything what React brings, but with vanilla JS. So vanilla is like only JavaScript. So it took me 20 hours to end the task to like build the application in vanilla JS, but less than 2 hours in React. So it was like uh, it really helps to have the framework or library.
Yeah. We have another question. Oh, it's definitely for you. 10 years ago, there were different technologies like Silverlight, JWT, ActiveScript, Flex. Are they all dead, like for good and all?
Uh, JWT, I believe.
Not like Google WT, not the
Okay.
not
Uh,
the JSON we're talking.
10 years ago, I believe I was playing with in the kindergarten. I don't know. For things that are used today, like the modern web, um, I think we are using something different, not abandoning the what was before, but taking advantage of what was before. I wouldn't say we're using the same exact solutions, uh, but like before said, frameworks works on top one on top each other. So maybe the exact thing is not used, but like it was built from. So yeah.
Yeah, I think if some technology framework library doesn't matter dies, it has a reason why it died, and trying to revive it is not very useful, especially if you're taking into account security concerns. So I recently read a bit about the security in browsers, and like they're improving all the time, and so they have a lot of new mechanisms that are used for that. And I don't know these technologies that's mentioned in the question, but if the technology was last time updated 10 years ago, maybe it will not be able to use, I don't know, something a bit more modern, like cross origin course, how they
Yeah.
what do they stand for, and your website will be slower, more difficult to write and maintain. So yeah, I would probably stick to
Mhm.
what is here now.
The
Uh,
I think what JavaScript does, it doesn't kill what was in the past. It's building on top because we have new syntaxes. What was like 3 years ago included now in this year came new thing. So even HTML, which is not so updated so often, has lately new features, new things that came up. So if you have the 20 years ago website, I think sometimes it won't be supported by the browser, not it's not able to open. But generally speaking, the front end is built like to last forever. If you have something, it will be, but it won't be so efficient like for today. So I don't know also the things you mentioned. Uh, like I'm saying, for the frameworks, uh, for example, some dies because of we cannot cover everything. Special framework is for special things, and one aims for performance, one aims for flexibility, one's aim for like viewing 3D. So mm, too many things, but I wouldn't say it dies. It's not used, so that's different things.
Yeah, and I also thought when you mentioned that the JavaScript adds more features to the language, I thought that soon the Java 21 will come out,
Also, I
and
heard about that.
yeah, it's also will probably bring some features that will make it look a bit closer to the JavaScript. So maybe I don't know, in 10 years we will have the same language with just different compilers for the backend, for the front end. Yeah, and JWT was an attempt to be full stack, write Java on front and back. Okay, convert front to JavaScript automatically. It was not much fun. Yeah, probably. I actually haven't heard about it. I have used other technologies. Oh my god, how are they called? Uh, I can't recall. It started with J for Java. Yeah, I think that writing the front end with Java wasn't very pleasant. It differed a lot from the Java, so you probably needed not Java developers to do it. And also, it was not the JavaScript, so you needed special people to do it. And I'm glad that these technologies died, and maybe some other will arise soon, but I hope not. I like developing backends. Yeah. Yeah, and we have maybe the last question that was submitted before the event. The TypeScript, from what I understand, it's like a wrapper around the common JavaScript that adds compile time checks for the types typing system and all that stuff. And as far as I heard, it's extensively used nowadays. What do you think about it?
I moved totally to TypeScript. There are things that are not commonly used only on such specific parts, but generally what I'm using TypeScript and in projects I'm part of, we have the types of fields that we can manipulate in the application. So we don't need to worry about what data and where it's flowing. We know that because of TypeScript, and it guards us to do foolish stuff, to forget something is camel case, something kebab case. It's hard to maintain when you have 1 million of lines in huge uh, huge code base. So uh, if you have TypeScript, it's easier to see what function outputs, what function gets, and yeah, it helps a lot. I like it very much.
Yeah, does it add anything except the type system?
Type errors. what what
Well,
you?
it's a part of
Yeah,
these.
of course. Uh, Generally, it's not bringing to the browser. TypeScript is on the time of compiling, so uh, you cannot run the TypeScript file on the browser. Sorry, that was a ring. Yes, so nothing on top of the language we're having in the
Okay.
browser.
Uh, okay. Right now, I don't see any more questions, and well, we're close to our time limit. Thanks a lot, Rafael, for the. Oh my God, I forgot. 30 seconds of commercial. Just give me a second. Uh, yeah, as always, I remind you that we have a free Java online school, MJC.school. It starts from the very basics of Java, from like writing the main methods and well, running your first program, and up to the modern framework. Spring is the framework of our choice, and the cloud, CI/CD. So basically everything that a junior Java developer knows. Should know. Join for free today or tomorrow, but better today. Why wait for tomorrow? mjc.school. Okay, that's it. Thanks a lot. I
Thank
hope.
you for having me.
I hope the front end is easier to understand now. And see you guys next week on the Light Talk. Thank you and bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.